I reached financial stability, paid every bill, and built the secure life I always wanted. One quiet night at my kitchen table forced me to face a truth I could no longer ignore. The night I realized money was never going to save me. I was sitting alone at my kitchen table, staring at a bank balance that should have made me feel invincible. For most of my life, I believed financial stability was the finish line. Not happiness, not joy, stability, safety. The kind of life where nothing could sneak up behind you and knock you flat. I did not dream about mansions or sports cars. I dreamed about quiet, about not flinching when the phone rang, about sleeping through the night without my chest tightening over bills I had not even opened yet. That dream started early. I grew up in a house where money was a constant background noise, like a leaky faucet you could never quite shut off. My parents worked hard, but it never seemed to be enough. There were late fees, overdue notices, arguments whispered too loudly behind closed doors. I learned young that money problems did not just stay on paper. They crept into voices, into moods, into the way people treated each other when they were scared. I remember lying in bed as a kid, staring at the ceiling, listening to my dad pace the living room after midnight. His footsteps were slow and heavy, like each step cost him something. Even back then, I made a quiet promise to myself. I told myself that when I grew up, I would never live like that. I would never let money decide whether I felt safe. That promise became my compass. While other kids were talking about what they wanted to be, I was already thinking about what I could afford. I learned to measure risk like it was a threat. I avoided anything that felt unstable. I chose practical over exciting every single time. Not because I loved it, but because fear has a way of disguising itself as responsibility. I worked steadily. I saved religiously. I skipped vacations, drove old cars, lived below my means even when my income started to climb. Every dollar I put away felt like a brick in a wall I was building around myself. The wall was supposed to keep everything bad out. And it worked, at least on the surface. Years passed. Promotions came. The savings account grew. The emergencies that once would have destroyed me became inconveniences instead. I watched people around me panic over things that no longer touched me, and I told myself I was doing it right. I told myself peace was just around the corner. That once I crossed some invisible line, the tension would finally drain out of my body. I did not realize it then, but something else was growing alongside my stability. Something quieter. Something that did not care how much money I had saved. And the night I finally reached the place I had been chasing for decades, I was completely unprepared for what came next. Because that was the moment everything I believed was about to crack open. By the time I was in my early 20s, I was already tired in a way sleep never fixed. I did everything the careful way. I picked a major that sounded stable when you said it out loud to relatives. I worked part-time while taking classes, then full-time the moment I graduated. I did not chase passion. I chased predictability. Every paycheck felt like proof that I was slowly outrunning the life I grew up in. I watched friends jump from job to job, talk about finding themselves, take chances that made my stomach not just listening to them. I told myself they were reckless. Deep down, I was jealous of how light they seemed. But fear kept me disciplined. Fear kept me consistent. I tracked every expense. I knew exactly where my money went, down to the dollar. Eating out felt irresponsible. New clothes felt unnecessary. I told myself it was temporary, just until I felt safe. Just until I built a cushion thick enough to soften anything that might fall on me. When unexpected expenses came up, I handled them quietly. A car repair, a medical bill, things that once would have sent my parents into a spiral barely registered for me. I felt a small surge of pride every time I paid something off without panic. I told myself this was what progress felt like. People started calling me responsible, reliable, the guy who had his life together. I leaned into that identity hard. I said no to trips, no to risks, no to anything that might slow my climb toward stability. I told myself there would be time for fun later, time for rest later, time for peace later. What I did not notice was how tense my body always felt. My shoulders were permanently tight. My jaw ached in the mornings. Even on good days, I moved like something was about to go wrong. I scanned for problems automatically, the way some people check mirrors while driving. If I got a raise, I felt relief for about 5 minutes. Then my mind immediately recalculated what could still go wrong. What if the market dipped? What if I got laid off? What if something happened that wiped out everything I had built? Stability became a moving target. Every milestone just revealed the next one. Every sense of security came with a new condition attached. I told myself that was normal, that being careful was the same thing as being smart. But there were cracks. Sometimes I would sit in my apartment at night, surrounded by everything I needed, and feel the same tightness I remembered from childhood. The same alertness. The same low-level dread that hummed under the surface for no clear reason. I ignored it. I doubled down instead. I saved more, planned more, controlled more. I was convinced that if I just stayed disciplined long enough, my nervous system would eventually get the message. That one day I would wake up and feel different. And when I finally crossed the financial line I had been chasing for years, I expected that moment to arrive all at once. I had no idea how wrong I was. Because the day I realized I had officially made it was also the day something inside me started to unravel. I remember the exact moment it happened, which is strange because nothing dramatic took place. No champagne, no phone call, no celebration. I was sitting at my desk on a random Tuesday afternoon, flipping between accounts the way I always did. Checking balances had become a reflex, like touching your pocket to make sure your keys were still there. I ran the numbers slowly, then again, just to be sure. Income steady, expenses predictable, savings solid, emergency fund untouched and large enough to absorb real damage. For the first time, there was nothing left to calculate. That was when it hit me. Quietly, almost politely. I had made it. Not rich, not flashy, but stable in the way I had promised myself as a kid lying awake at night. If I lost my job, I would be okay. If something broke, I could fix it. If life threw a punch, I had padding now. I leaned back in my chair and waited. This was supposed to be the part where my shoulders dropped, where my breathing slowed, where some internal switch flipped and told me it was safe to relax. It did not happen. I sat there longer than I want to admit, staring at the screen, waiting for relief to show up like it was late to an appointment. Instead, my chest stayed tight. My mind stayed alert. My body stayed braced. I told myself maybe it needed time. Maybe peace arrived gradually, like your ears adjusting after loud noise. So I closed the laptop and went for a walk. The weather was good. The neighborhood was quiet. Everything looked exactly like the life I had worked for. And still, my thoughts kept scanning. What if this stability was temporary? What if I was missing something? What if I got complacent and paid for it later? The realization unsettled me more than I expected. I had spent years believing my anxiety was logical, a response to real danger, a survival tool that would retire once it was no longer needed. But here I was, safer than I had ever been, and my nervous system was acting like nothing had changed. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying the moment over and over. The numbers did not lie. The situation was solid. By every rational measure, I should have felt calm. Instead, I felt exposed. Like the thing I had been using as an excuse for my tension was gone, and the tension stayed anyway. I could not blame circumstances anymore. I could not point to instability and say, that is why. A thought surfaced that made me uncomfortable enough to sit up in bed. What if money was never the problem? What if I had built my entire identity around preparing for danger, and now that the danger was gone, my body did not know how to stand down? I tried to laugh it off, told myself I was overthinking, that I just needed to adjust. But deep down, I sensed something shifting, something I could not calculate or save my way out of. And the more I tried to ignore it, the louder it became. The weeks after that realization were some of the strangest of my life. On paper, nothing was wrong. I woke up on time. I went to work. I exercised. I ate decently. I paid my bills without thinking twice. From the outside, I looked like someone who had figured things out. Inside, I felt like I was standing guard over a threat that never arrived. The anxiety did not spike. It did not explode. It just stayed. A low, steady hum that followed me everywhere. In meetings, my leg bounced under the table. At red lights, my hands tightened on the steering wheel. At night, my mind ran inventory on everything that could still go wrong, even though I had already accounted for it all. That was when the headaches started. At first, they were easy to dismiss. Stress, I told myself. Screen time. Not enough water. But they kept coming, dull and persistent, settling behind my eyes like pressure that never fully released. One afternoon, I caught my reflection in the bathroom mirror at work and barely recognized the guy staring back. My face looked older, tighter, like I was holding something in all the time. For the first time in years, a different kind of fear crept in. Not financial. Physical. I went to the doctor more for reassurance than concern. Blood pressure was high. Not dangerous, but elevated enough to raise an eyebrow. The doctor asked me about stress, about sleep, about whether I ever felt tense for no clear reason. I almost laughed. I wanted to explain that tension was my default setting, that I had built my entire adult life around avoiding disaster, and now my body did not know how to exist without it. But instead, I nodded and gave vague answers. I walked out with advice to relax more, sleep better, slow down. Slow down felt like a foreign language. At work, something else shifted. A reorganization was announced. Nothing threatening, just changes. New management, new priorities. But my reaction surprised me. My heart raced like I was about to lose everything. Even though my position was secure and my savings could carry me for years. That was when it hit me. I did not just use money for safety. I used vigilance, constant alertness, control. Stability had not replaced fear. It had given fear a quieter place to hide. The wall I built to protect myself had turned into a cage, and I was the one pacing inside it, checking the locks over and over even though no one was trying to get in. One night, I sat on my couch with the lights off, the city glowing faintly through the window, and admitted something I had never said out loud. Not to anyone. I did not know how to feel calm. Safety was familiar. Calm was not. And that realization scared me more than being broke ever had. Because for the first time, I understood that no amount of money was going to teach me what peace actually felt like. And I was nowhere near ready to face what that meant next. I tried to handle it the same way I handled everything else in my life. Quietly, privately, with discipline. I downloaded meditation apps, read articles about stress management, cut back on caffeine. I even took a few days off work, telling myself maybe my system just needed a reset. I filled those days with long walks, healthy meals, early nights. From the outside, it looked like self-care. Inside, nothing softened. Sitting still made it worse. The silence gave my thoughts too much room to move. Without deadlines or spreadsheets to focus on, my mind drifted back to old memories I had not thought about in years. Moments from childhood. The sound of my parents arguing. The way my stomach used to drop when I heard the mail slot clang, knowing another bill had arrived. I realized something uncomfortable during one of those quiet afternoons. My anxiety did not start because I was irresponsible. It started because I was a kid who learned early that safety could disappear without warning. And that lesson had lodged itself deep, far below logic or reason. The discipline I was so proud of was not just about money. It was armor. That thought rattled me. If discipline was armor, then who was I underneath it? I started noticing patterns I had always brushed off. The way I struggled to enjoy good moments without scanning for what might ruin them. The way I planned for disasters that never came. The way I felt uneasy when things were calm, like calm itself was suspicious. One evening, I met an old friend for dinner. Someone I had not seen in years. He asked how I was doing, and for once, I did not default to the polished answer. I hesitated. Too long. He noticed. He said something simple, almost careless. He told me it looked like I had built a very safe life, but not a very gentle one. That sentence followed me home like an echo. Gentle. I did not know how to be gentle with myself. I knew how to be prepared. I knew how to be disciplined. I knew how to survive. But rest felt undeserved. Ease felt dangerous. That night, I stood in the shower longer than usual, letting the water run until it started to cool. I leaned my forehead against the tile and felt something unfamiliar rise up. Grief. Not for money I never had, but for the version of myself that never got to feel safe, even now. The kid who promised himself stability would fix everything, without realizing he was carrying the fear with him the whole time. I dried off, got dressed, and sat on the edge of my bed in the dark. For the first time, I wondered if the thing I had been chasing was never meant to cure me, only to protect me. And if that was true, then the real work was something I had been avoiding my entire life. Because fixing numbers was easy. Facing what lived underneath them was not. And I could feel that whatever came next was going to demand more from me than discipline ever had. The turning point did not come from some big breakdown or dramatic event. It came from something small and inconvenient. I was standing in line at the grocery store one evening, holding a basket with maybe 6 items in it. Nothing stressful, nothing urgent, just another quiet errand in a life full of quiet errands. The cashier rang me up, the total popped up on the screen, and without thinking, my chest tightened. The number was meaningless to me. I could have paid it 10 times over and not noticed. And yet, there it was. That familiar surge. That old reflex. In that moment, something inside me snapped into focus. My body did not care about my bank account. It was reacting to a memory, a pattern, a learned response that had nothing to do with the present. I paid, walked to my car, and just sat there with the engine off, hands resting on the steering wheel, heart still racing for no reason. The parking lot lights hummed overhead, and I realized how exhausted I was. Not tired in the way sleep fixes, tired in the way running from yourself does. That was when another memory surfaced, one I had not thought about in decades. I was maybe 9 years old, standing in a grocery store with my mom, watching her quietly put items back on the shelf because the total was higher than she expected. She tried to smile like it was no big deal. I remember staring at the floor, feeling embarrassed and scared and helpless all at once. Standing there in my car, I finally understood something I had been missing. I had not built stability to feel rich. I built it to never feel that small again. And that version of me was still in the driver's seat. No amount of savings had told him it was over. No milestone had ever gone back in time and explained that the danger had passed. So he kept sounding the alarm, over and over. That night, I did something wildly out of character. I did not open a budgeting app. I did not plan. I did not optimize. I searched for a therapist. Even typing the word felt strange. Like admitting failure. Like confessing that discipline alone was not enough. I told myself it was temporary. Just a tune-up. Something practical. But deep down, I knew it was more than that. Because the truth was starting to become impossible to ignore. I was safe, but I did not feel calm. And if calm was not going to arrive on its own, then I was going to have to learn it. From scratch. I clicked through profiles, scanning credentials the same way I once scanned interest rates. Old habits die hard. I scheduled an appointment before I could talk myself out of it. As I closed my laptop, a strange mix of relief and fear settled in. For years, I had believed stability was the answer. Now I was finally admitting that the question itself had been wrong. And whatever I was about to uncover next was not going to be something I could save my way out of. The first therapy session did not feel like a breakthrough. It felt awkward. I sat in a quiet room across from a stranger who asked me how I was doing, and my mouth automatically started listing facts. Job stable. Bills paid. No major issues. I caught myself halfway through and stopped. Even saying those things felt hollow now. She waited. Did not rush me. That silence did more damage than any question. So I told her the truth, or at least the closest version of it I could reach at the time. I told her I had spent my entire life preparing for disaster, and now that disaster was no longer knocking, my body refused to stand down. I told her I felt ridiculous complaining when everything was technically fine. She nodded like she had heard this story before. That unsettled me. Over the next few sessions, patterns started to surface. Not dramatic revelations. Small observations that landed harder than I expected. She pointed out how often I used words like responsible, prepared, careful. How rarely I talked about enjoyment or rest. How I framed anxiety as a useful tool instead of something that might need compassion. At one point, she asked me a question that knocked the air out of me. She asked what I believed would happen if I stopped being vigilant. I laughed at first. Then I realized I did not actually know. The idea of letting my guard down felt dangerous in a way I could not explain logically. Like tempting fate. Like inviting chaos back into my life. My body reacted before my brain could catch up. Heart racing. Shoulders tight. A familiar alarm going off. That was when it clicked. My nervous system was still living in my childhood home. Still listening for raised voices. Still bracing for sudden loss. Stability had changed my circumstances, but it had never been translated into my body. Safety was a concept. Calm was a sensation. And I had never learned the difference. Outside of therapy, life kept moving. Work continued. Savings grew. Everything I had chased kept confirming I was doing well. And yet, something strange began happening. I started noticing moments of quiet discomfort when nothing was required of me. Weekends with no plans made me restless. Evenings without tasks felt empty instead of peaceful. I filled the space with productivity, not because I needed to, but because stillness felt like exposure. One night, I left the television off and sat in my living room with the lights dimmed. No distractions. No lists. Just me. My body did not like it. Thoughts surfaced uninvited. Old fears. Old vows. That childhood promise echoed again, louder this time. the one about never feeling unsafe. And for the first time, I saw the flaw in it. I had mistaken control for peace. Control kept me alive, but it never taught me how to rest. As that realization settled in, I felt something unfamiliar underneath the fear. Not relief yet, but curiosity. If anxiety could outlive the circumstances that created it, maybe calm could be learned the same way. The thought scared me, because it meant the final work had nothing to do with money at all. Once I saw it, I could not unsee it. My life was quiet, but it was not peaceful. There is a difference I had never understood before. Quiet is just the absence of noise. Peace is the absence of threat. And my body still believed the threat was real, even when my life kept proving otherwise. Therapy stopped being about fixing anxiety and started being about understanding it. I learned that my constant planning was not ambition. It was vigilance. My discipline was not just maturity. It was protection. Every habit I was proud of had once kept me safe, and my nervous system did not care that the danger had passed. It only knew what had worked. That realization brought an unexpected twist. I started feeling compassion for the anxiety instead of fighting it. That felt wrong at first, like rewarding bad behavior, like letting go of control. But the more I pushed against it, the louder it got. The more I acknowledged it, the quieter it became, at least for moments at a time. Those moments were brief, fragile, almost suspicious. I would feel a few seconds of real calm while sitting on my couch or walking through the park, and my brain would immediately jump in with questions. Is this safe? How long will this last? What if something ruins it? Peace felt unfamiliar enough to trigger fear. That was the twist I did not expect. I was not afraid of instability anymore. I was afraid of letting my guard down. One evening, my therapist asked me to describe what calm felt like in my body. I struggled. I could describe stress in detail. The tight chest, the shallow breath, the buzzing alertness. Calm, on the other hand, felt vague, slippery, hard to trust. She told me something that stuck. She said I had learned safety through money, but never through experience. I had built a fortress without ever teaching myself that I could sit inside it and rest. So we started small, painfully small. I practiced doing nothing without justifying it, sitting without planning, enjoying moments without scanning for what might go wrong next. It felt unnatural, like using a muscle that had never been exercised. Some days it worked. Other days, my anxiety roared back louder, like it was testing whether I meant it this time. And then life threw me a curveball I was not prepared for. Not a financial one, an emotional one. Someone I cared about needed me in a way money could not solve. No spreadsheet, no savings account, no safety net I could build fast enough to avoid the discomfort. And standing there, exposed and uncertain, I realized this was the real test. Because for the first time, stability was not going to save me. And whatever came next was going to force me to choose between control and calm. It was my younger sister who called. We were not especially close, not distant either. Just two people who grew up in the same house and learned different ways to survive it. When her name lit up my phone that night, I almost let it go to voicemail out of habit. I was tired. It had been a long day. Nothing was wrong enough to demand attention. I am glad I answered. Her voice was tight, not panicked, but strained in that way that tells you someone has been holding it together for too long. She did not ask for money. That was the first thing I noticed. No hesitation. No soft build-up. She just said she was not okay and did not know who else to call. That alone threw me off balance. I listened as she explained what was going on. A relationship falling apart. A sense of failure she could not shake. Nights spent awake, spiraling. The words came out messy and unorganized, like she had not planned to say any of this out loud. My instincts kicked in immediately. I wanted to fix it. I wanted to offer solutions, resources, plans. I started calculating options in my head like I always did. Therapy costs, time off work, backup plans, ways to make this manageable, ways to reduce risk, ways to create stability. None of it landed. She was not looking for safety nets. She was looking for presence. At one point, she paused and said something that hit me harder than I expected. She said she did not need answers. She just needed someone to sit with her in it. That scared me, because sitting meant not controlling. Sitting meant not optimizing. Sitting meant feeling the discomfort instead of neutralizing it. There was no finish line here. No number I could hit to make it stop. So I stayed quiet. I listened. I breathed. I felt my own anxiety flare up, begging me to do something useful, to take charge, to make it better. But I did not. We talked for over an hour. No breakthroughs. No resolutions. Just shared space. When we finally hung up, nothing had been fixed. And yet, something in me felt different. Not calm exactly, but grounded. I realized that for the first time in my life, I had stayed present through uncertainty without trying to outmaneuver it. I had not reached for control as a shield. I had let the discomfort exist without rushing to end it. That night, I slept better than I had in months. Not because everything was resolved, but because I had stopped fighting reality long enough to meet it where it was. Lying there in the dark, another thought crept in. One that felt dangerous and freeing at the same time. Maybe peace was not something you earn by securing every variable. Maybe it was something you practice by staying when you want to run. The idea unsettled me. Because if that was true, then the final answer I had been chasing was not out there in my bank account or my careful planning. It was somewhere inside the one place I had avoided my entire life. And I was standing right at the edge of it. The last shift did not arrive with fireworks. It arrived on a morning that looked exactly like every other morning. I woke up early out of habit, sunlight barely cutting through the blinds, my mind already reaching for the day ahead. For a split second, the old reflex kicked in. What needs to be handled? What could go wrong? What should I prepare for? Then something different happened. I noticed the reflex instead of obeying it. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, and felt my body waiting for instructions. Waiting for tension. Waiting for me to tell it the world was dangerous again. I did not. I breathed. Slowly. Not to calm myself down, but to stay present long enough to see what happened next. Nothing happened. No disaster. No collapse. No sudden loss. Just quiet. Not the brittle, alert quiet I had lived in for years. Something softer. Less urgent. It did not feel euphoric. It did not feel permanent. It felt ordinary. And that was the point. For the first time, I understood what had been missing all along. Stability had kept me safe. But safety alone had never taught me how to live without armor. I had spent decades solving a problem that no longer existed, using tools that were never designed to bring peace. Money did exactly what I asked it to do. It protected me. It gave me options. It reduced risk. What it never promised was calm. I just assumed it would. The anxiety did not vanish. It still showed up, especially in old familiar situations. But now, when it did, I recognized it as a habit instead of a warning. A leftover echo from a time when fear made sense. I stopped asking myself when peace would arrive. I started asking how often I could practice it. Sometimes that meant letting a moment be good without bracing for the fallout. Sometimes it meant sitting with discomfort without fixing it. Sometimes it meant admitting I was safe even when my body disagreed. The biggest realization came quietly, almost embarrassingly simple. I had been confusing survival with living. Financial stability gave me a foundation, but peace required something money could never buy. Trust, presence, the willingness to feel without controlling the outcome. That was the part no one taught me. I still save. I still plan. I still value security. But it no longer carries the weight of my entire emotional life. It is a tool now, not a shield. The irony is hard to miss. I spent my life believing peace lived at the end of a long, disciplined climb. It turns out it was waiting for me to stop climbing long enough to notice where I already was. And that awareness did not fix everything. But it finally gave me something better than stability. It gave me a way forward that did not depend on fear.